Hey, this is Ryan Jones with the Serverless Guru Show. And this conversation, we're going to be speaking to Dallas Slaughter. Dallas is a Portland developer, recently moved to Seattle. He mostly works in the AWS space. I'll let him introduce himself. Welcome, Dallas.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Dallas, as stated, AWS node developer. Moved up to Seattle from Portland about a year and a half ago to take a product developer position. Doing a lot of, I work for a digital marketing company, so I do a lot of data manipulation, ETL in the cloud, and we kind of branch out from there and do a lot of different things for our clients. So it's varies from day to day, but a lot of time in AWS, and work mostly in Node, developing just all kinds of random little things, everything from a little script to manipulate a CSV into the right format and get the right things out, to developing entire product platforms for nonprofit organizations. It's pretty cool.
Wow, yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there. I guess let's go ahead and let's start at the beginning of Dallas Slaughter's journey to tech and software engineering. Where did you come from? How did you learn about computers, programming? When did it start?
Yeah, so I think I've been interested in computers probably like since I was like 7 or 8. I remember my dad carrying the first one like ever into the house, and I was like smashing on the keyboard, and he was like, that's like, don't do that. And that immediately got me, for some reason, to like, I must figure out how this works if I can't touch it. So I spent, my whole life fiddling around with computers. Not a lot of programming or anything, just every little I like to touch buttons and see what happens. So I spent my entire life just touching buttons on computers to see what happened and breaking things. And I unfortunately didn't make it through college due to financial issues. So I spent a decade working grocery stores, retail, working restaurants, and had a really bad day one day and kind of decided like, I've wanted to be a programmer since I was a kid. I've had like tiny little forays here and there into random languages and like doing little things, and I loved it. I'm gonna go to a code school because I was working as a bartender and had a couple people from Epicodus actually come in, and I talked to them about it, and I looked it up that night, signed up, secured a way to get the money, and decided to go. And yeah, I think that's how I ended up here, to be sure.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. So like you got into tech really early on. It caught your attention, but then it wasn't until, 10, 15 years later when finally it was like the right stuff coming together to make that happen.
Yeah, I was 28 when I finally decided to like do the thing I'd wanted to do my whole life.
And so what was it like after you kind of pressed that button and you went, you know what, I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to go to code school. That code school that you went to, that was in Portland, Oregon?
Yeah, it's Epicodus in Portland, located right there in downtown Portland. It was a lot. Of course, I actually had to like secure a loan, get some money up front for that, and then change my whole schedule because that's like it's a 40-hour-a-week code school. A lot of them do different schedules. Epicodus is 8 to 5 every day, or 9 to 5. It's been a while. 9 to 5 every day, 5 days a week for like 6 months. So I had to change around my work schedule to fit that. If you live cheaply, you can totally get by on like 16 hours a week, by the way. And it was a lot. Yeah, I learned a whole ton, met a lot of really, really cool people, just packing information in and doing really, really cool things, progressively cooler things every day. It was awesome, and it kind of went by in a blur, and I would totally do it again if it made any sense to do it.
That's awesome. To go back to what you said about the loan, I think one big area that I've heard around code schools and financing. Did you go to a bank for that, or was that a program?
Yeah, so the same way as I found Epicodus, I spent like 4 hours on Google going through every possible option, looking at reviews and checking everything. I realized I'd have to get a loan, so I figured I'd see if maybe there was like some government grants, and there are. They can be kind of weird to find. I unfortunately didn't get any of those, but there are programs that are geared towards like vocational loans for school, and code schools fall into that. So I found one, UAS Echo, I believe, is the name of it. But it gets weird with loans because there's subsidiaries and banks involved, and they all call each other different things. But yeah, they specifically do that. I just had to get somebody to co-sign because my credit wasn't very good. It was actually a pretty quick and painless process. I don't think a bank would give you a loan to go to a code school unless you already had like pretty good credit and some savings, because it's kind of a risky move to let someone quit their job for 6 months and give them 10 grand.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you got a loan, you secured it pretty easily, and then how long between when you applied and then when you actually started at the code school?
They actually, I think technically I was after the cutoff for the program, but they got me in like 2 weeks. Somebody dropped out of the cohort, I believe, or something, and they managed to shuffle me in. So it was like, yeah, 2 or 3 weeks from the time I applied to when I started.
Okay. And then when you started there, did you have an idea for the type of like technologies that you would be working with, and what kind of other students who went to that same code school, what they would kind of finish with? Or was it more like you had like a general idea?
Yes, knew what technology, we'd be working with. I signed up specifically. There were tracks, different, there was a Ruby on Rails track, which I don't believe they do anymore, unfortunately. There was a Java track. There was like a UI UX track. So I went into the Java Android track. I already knew that's where I would go. Had no idea what other people there would be like. And that was actually one of the more interesting things, is because even if I had an idea, it was such a wide array of different people, like plenty of your stereotypical nerds, and then also plenty of people who you would never have like met in the street and guess would, be programmers or be interested in programming. But it was nice, yeah, having the track and having all of that. We were all kind of working on the same thing, and everybody got to kind of bounce ideas off each other and learn from each other. And, people who were willing to put in extra time or had extra time to put in kind of banded together and spent a lot of time like after class learning more. It was really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then as like the code school went on and you started getting more towards the kind of the end of it, did you start feeling the pressure for like the job search?
Yeah, they start drilling it in. They start working on cover letters and resumes, and there's an internship, like the last 5 weeks are an internship at a company, and you do a bunch of different interviews, and they kind of talk about like what jobs to apply for, and there's definitely a lot of services and prep around that. So the pressure of the job search was, yeah, it was put on by the school a little bit. And also, realizing you're about to be done with this program, and, you don't want to go back to the grocery store, or you don't want to go back to the grocery store for very long. So yeah, there was a lot of pressure to secure a job out of that, which fortunately for me, I hit the jackpot and got something, and I was up in Seattle and working in like 2 or 3 weeks after I finished the program.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. So you basically got a job 2 or 3 weeks after graduating. How did you get that? Like, where did that come from?
The place, they tell you you're never going to get a job. I shotgunned LinkedIn with my resume and cover letter everywhere. And I was applying for jobs in Portland. I was applying for jobs in Seattle. I was also applying for jobs in Tennessee, where I grew up, on the off chance that anything happened there, because, I could move in with my mom or dad, depending on where it was. So, I was willing to move for it. I was willing to take that chance, which I think was kind of important. I don't know what would have happened if I had just only looked in Portland. If I had not been willing to relocate, that might have been problematic. It definitely wouldn't have been as fast of a turnaround. So yeah, just shotgun LinkedIn, and fortunately, I put a little bit of personality in my profile, and my current VP of Tech saw that, and it caught his attention, and he reached out to me about actually a different position than I even applied for, because I applied for a front end position. Fortunately, didn't get that one. And yeah, he reached out to me about that, and yeah, it was like from that day, 9 days later, I was in Seattle working.
Wow. And so you'd been in Portland for how long before you left?
8 years, 9 years, 8 years.
Okay. And then 7 days later, you're like in a completely different city. Did you have friends up there, or what was the situation?
Yeah, fortunately, I did have a friend up here. I had a place where I could, crash, because I was still totally, completely broke. I had no money. I mean, like all I had was my car, basically, and whatever I could fit in there in a storage building. But yeah, I had a place to crash in Kent, which isn't super close. It was the most inconvenient thing in the world, but I was very grateful for it. It was very cool.
Nice. And then you started, you said that you didn't get the front end position, which was a good thing. And then what type of position did you get instead?
Yeah, so my official title is product engineer. So like I said, I work at a digital marketing company. And for those who aren't familiar, your average digital marketing company is going to do like your website's SEO. They're going to do your like campaigns through Google ads, going to do things like content marketing, writing blog posts or content for your website, and SEOing it up and, put it on the right platforms. Fortunately, I don't work directly in much of that, so I'm not 100% on exactly what they do. It's magic, and it gets people to go to your website. So there's, a need for internal tools, and so I was originally hired to develop some internal tools. And it was actually only a 3-month contract, which I did get a full-time position out of, very fortunately again. So yeah, started out doing a cloud service to do some data manipulation and databasing and serving and visualization for paid advertising data. There's a ton of data, and there's no real way to like visualize how, a client might be doing compared to last month in a nice way. So I was developing an internal tool for that.
Okay, cool. And so you started with internal tools more in the like back-end space, and then you kind of moved. Are you still doing internal tools now, or have you built any applications in different areas?
I did a few internal tools. There's several of those, and it was a lot of R&D, unfortunately, they're not like super high utilization, because it was, do we need this? Does it work? Whatnot. And then I do a lot of ad hoc stuff now, pulling data from here or there, manipulating it, databasing things, setting up systems. I do a lot of like server administration. We have a ton of EC2s because we run a bunch of clients, WordPress websites and whatnot for them. So a lot of that. And then, like I said, we recently built a platform for a nonprofit to find organizations in the state to work with. So it's a pretty wide variety of work, honestly, which is really cool. It keeps it pretty interesting.
Okay. And compared to like a normal working environment with you kind of switching around to those different projects, has that kept you like actively engaged in the company?
Yeah, because there's like always something new and cool on the horizon. So if you're working on something that's like super annoying, those things that you just get frustrated at and have to do every day anyway, it's cool to know that like, all right, as soon as I'm finished with this, though, I get to jump back over to this like crazy, 1,000 Lambda config thing and setting up all the backend for it and the APIs, and get to like play around with the cool stuff. So it keeps it pretty cool. And then also having that wide variety that we work in, you never actually like, this sprint, I know what I'm working on. The sprint after that, like we may sign a client that needs us to build some crazy backend thing for their data, and I might get to architect and build that. So it's exciting. I would say it keeps me engaged.
Nice, that's awesome. And then one thing that you mentioned right at the beginning was ETL.
Yeah.
So could you kind of give a background of what an ETL is?
Yeah, absolutely. So ETL is extract, transform, and load. You'll see it a lot in relation to databases, data visualization, data in general. You take it's kind of what it says. You extract the data from whatever the source may be. You transform it into whatever way you need, whether that be turning JSON into a CSV or manipulating the text of the data or whatever to fit some format, and the transform step, and then load, which is put it in your warehouse, however that may work out. So it's a long process of like JSON to CSV or disparate data sources, transforming them into your database format.
Okay. And so after it goes through the ETL process, how is that data actually used for applications? Does it pull it from that data warehouse that you mentioned, and then how does that work?
It really depends on what your process is. There's plenty of ETL around just like setting up reports. You get some 40,000 CSVs with 10 million rows each and like 30 columns, and then you need to turn that into like a 10 by 10 cell in an Excel spreadsheet. There's no button in Excel for that I know of. I don't know. I'm not great with Excel. So yeah, you send me a message on Slack and say, here, I've got all these CSVs and I need like these columns out of it. Or like with the initial product, I worked with Amazon Redshift, which is a distributed SQL thing. It's really cool and does a lot of interesting things. It has multiple compute nodes and executes the SQL in a really smart way and indexes things really cool. It's pretty neat if you have like a lot of data. I would recommend people check that out if you're finding your MySQL instance to be a little slow. But yeah, that powered some Tableau visualizations. We use it a lot to just pull ad hoc reports, just do a SQL query and get the client's, year over year ROI on this ad or whatever it may be. It really just depends on what you're ETLing the process for.
Very cool. And so for Dallas, what does the future look like? What type of things are you learning about or kind of getting more interested in?
Yeah, I've trying to move, working more in DevOps and a more concrete version of DevOps. When I started, it was really cool to find out that I could like run a CLI command to deploy my Lambda. And now I work a lot in Terraform, setting up entire stacks out of config. And if I spend no time in the console, in the AWS console in a day, like that's a very good day, because that means I'm doing like a ton of DevOps stuff around that. I want to continue working in that. I still really, really like Node and JavaScript and writing cool stuff there. So hopefully I can find like some middle ground there. And I just want to keep making things that people use. Like it doesn't have to be a huge audience. I just like the idea that I made something and it's not just going to like rot in a GitHub repo for the rest of time. I made something and like somebody's out there using it and getting some value out of it, especially helping nonprofits and whatnot. Yeah, that's awesome. So just keep learning and keep working, I guess, is my future goals.
Okay, yeah, that's something that I've dealt with as well, is the idea of like you create something really cool and then you throw it into, or you spend months creating something cool and then it ends up not getting used, and it's cool, it would be useful, but like there's always that like level of like, if somebody's using the thing and you see that person using it, it's like, oh my gosh, that is why you do it, because like you can see this person engaging with this product and then you can see the JavaScript or whatever in the background.
Yeah,
making it work.
I think that's one of like the interesting pitfalls of like doing a lot of development work too, especially if you're doing personal projects or something that you're not getting paid to do right there. So like you get to be a little more free in your choices. Is like you want to make something that's cool and people are going to use, and maybe you even have like a cool concept around something, but fighting reinventing the wheel just to get that satisfaction out of that. You gotta like find the middle ground where you're making something useful that you didn't overtax yourself creating.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any personal projects yourself that you're working on?
Here and there, not as much. I, do actually spend like 8 hours a day, programming or dealing with programming. So it can be a little bit hard at the end of the day to not only find the time, but like still want to write code. Currently working on a very, very large, long, dumb blog post on my own personal blog that I am creating on serving a blog out of AWS Lambda and API Gateway. It's a concept I've seen thrown around. I just really I wanted to have a blog, but I didn't want to just serve it out of S3 because that was too easy. And then I have a couple of other smaller projects that are like completely and totally just exist in notes in my head. But yeah, honestly, like at the end of the day, it can be a little difficult to find the time and energy to continue making things like that.
Yeah, I've struggled with that myself as well. It's like the idea that you're programming for like 8 hours, your brain is like mush at the end of the day, and then you have like all of these ideas, but like no time to actually implement them at all.
Yeah, it's the one thing I've actually finished was a joke, because I found out in JavaScript that if you so there's the isNone issue where like there's number.isNone and isNone, and they return opposite things but not entirely, and it's like this whole thing in JavaScript around if a number is not a number or not. And so I found out that if you create a set with something that is not a number converted to a number and not a number the object, like it implicitly will only have one item if it's not a number. So it's just like a really dumb, jokey way. That's like the 10 lines of code that I have managed to actually get done, and I forgot to even publish it anywhere. So that's how good I am at personal projects.
Nice. Cool. Well, thanks for joining on the Serverless Guru Show. It was great talking to you, Dallas, as always. Yeah, so that is the end of the broadcast. Thanks so much for listening, and then I will see you all next time. See you, Dallas.